Friends, thank you for joining me this Holy Week as we allow ourselves to be instructed by Jesus' 7 last words. The 7 last words of Christ are a historical tradition dating back to the 16th century. These words or sayings, these are the last things that Jesus said while hanging on the cross, and Christians throughout the years have used them, usually on Good Friday, to contemplate the depth of Jesus' willingness to be hung on a cross like a common thief for the likes of you and I. Ask anyone who's had a loved one die, and they very well might be able to tell you the last thing that person said to them. These last words take on special meaning, don't they? They tell us something about who the person was and what was important to them. If they used their remaining energy and truly their last breaths to say something, it must have been important, right? Well, it's the same with Jesus and the things that he said while on the cross. Being hung there was an excruciating experience, physically, mentally, emotionally. To say anything would have required an immense effort, and yet in the Gospels we find what Christians for several centuries have believed are a way for us to understand what was important to this man, this Emmanuel, this God with us. And so, in each of our moments together this week, we're going to focus on one of these last words. This time, our word is forgiveness. Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they do. I love the fact that the 7 last words begins here. As I was growing up, my family and my religious community rightly taught me about the need, the requirement on God's part that I do all in my power to live a holy and righteous life. And the way it was often phrased to me was that I was a sinner. A sinner saved by grace, to be sure, but the first concept I was taught was about my sinfulness. Many people shy away from the idea of sin these days, but I've actually come to embrace it. The older I get, the more acutely I'm aware that I am 10 pounds of garbage in a 5-pound bag. And you are too. Let's be honest, there's not one of us who actually lives up to what we know God would have us do and be. As the scripture says, we all fall short of the glory of God. When we introduce prayers of confession and worship, we often quote another passage of scripture. If we say we have no sin, we are liars, and the truth is not in us. And so it would make sense to say that the first thing that we should be hearing is about our sinfulness, but Jesus begins somewhere else. Jesus starts with forgiveness. He starts with grace. Father, forgive them. They don't know what they're doing. They don't know what they're doing. It's amazing to me that he could say that. Jesus suffered at the hands of an oppressive colonizing power. He had spent his entire ministry provoking both civil and religious leaders by ministering to the powerless, the outcast, the strangers, the deformed, the sick, the possessed, the women, Samaritans, on and on. In short, if you were not supposed to help a group of people, that's who Jesus was with. He gave them hope and life and courage and peace, and he threatened the established order. So it would have been very easy for him to feel justified in lashing out in anger as he hung there. It would not have been beyond comprehension for him to see those who were literally killing him as completely devoid of humanity. The Bible has a long tradition of blessing and curses, and Jesus could have very easily chosen to curse those who killed him because he was loving the lost and the least. But instead, he had compassion. He told God in prayer on the cross that his captors should be forgiven because they had no idea what they were doing. Instead of vengeance and retribution, he asked for grace. There's an idea prevalent that forgiveness can and should be extended, but not unless people ask for it. You, as a dirty sinner, can be forgiven, but only if you ask for it. Well, here's what I find life-giving about the grace of God. God grants grace before I even know that I need it. And if I think about it, that makes a lot of sense. I am so much garbage that I don't know beauty, I don't know goodness, I don't know truth. It takes a literal act of God for me to see those things. And we call that act of God grace. God does not ask something of me that I'm not capable of. And so God gives me the capacity to see that I'm in need of forgiveness. And that's amazing. And so what might this mean for us? If this is what the Bible shows us is in the heart of God, what does it mean for how we are supposed to live? I think there's a lot of opportunities to live with grace and forgiveness right now. Because of a global pandemic, a lot of us are cooped up in houses with our families. We're all learning how to navigate a new reality. I know in my house, we've stepped on each other. We've stepped over various lines more times than we want to admit, and we would each be justified in claiming that the other one should pay for doing us wrong. But trauma and crisis are frightening things, and we all just want the pain to stop. And so instead, I could pray for my sibling or my parent or my child. God, forgive them. They're doing the best they can. They don't know what they're doing. Or perhaps we're out at the grocery and the shelves are thinning or bare, and while we would be justified in being angry, perhaps we could remember that everyone is very afraid, and afraid people make very poor decisions. And so we can pray, God, forgive them. They're afraid and they don't know what they're doing. Friends, it's my prayer that forgiveness can flow from you today and in all the days to come.
Faith and hope and love abide, and the greatest of these is love. Faith and hope and love abide, and the greatest of these is love. Beloved, let us love one another, for love is of God. Yes, love is of God. And all who love are born of God, and they know God. Yes, they know God. Faith and hope and love abide, and the greatest of these is love. Faith and hope and love abide, and the greatest of these is love. Love does not insist on its own way. It is not quick to take offense. It does not rejoice in wrongdoing, but rejoices in right. Faith and hope and love abide, and the greatest of these is love. Faith and hope and love abide, and the greatest of these is love. Love is patient and love is kind.